The West Indies have been on quite a roller coaster this World Cup.
This is the last knock. When was the first knock? Don't know.
They started batting too fast, and then they lost a game by one player batting too slow. And even in their winning game, they lost wickets early, stopped mid-innings, slogged at the end, and then tried to misfield their way to a loss. So through all this madness, there's been quite a lot of opinion on the West Indies team. And a lot of it shows just how much we overreact to results in T20 cricket, and how often we don't learn as much about the sport because of it. Let's start with the 2 losses. As I said in a recent podcast, Chennai lost 3 games in a row coming into the IPL finals. No one really blinked or seemed to notice. You're going to lose games in T20, but where you lose them quite often informs the narrative. And in this tournament, you can't afford much of bad luck. But there is an element of bad luck in any T20 tournament. To find out who the best T20 teams are, you really need to look at like 40 games. And this is a 7 or 10 game tournament at best. We probably won't know who the best team is just because of who ends up with the trophy. We might, if we are lucky, find out which team is best suited to playing T20 like in the UAE. The West Indies winning 2 out of 4 years really actually taught us a lot more about who the best team was just because of those wins in 2012 and 2016, far more than maybe the individual wins actually taught. And then there is the fact that in the UAE leg of this tournament, teams who have batted first have won 3 of 18 games. The pitches, the dew, and just T20 as a sport have all played a part in that. Before West Indies trickled over the line against Bangladesh, it was 2 from 16. The toss has become a massive part of this tournament. And I am hoping that things will regress a little bit more, but as it currently stands, if you have a good team and you win 2 straight tosses in the finals, you might win the tournament. In the last 3 years of T20 in the UAE, teams batting first have won 43% of their games. So, I don't know, something has changed, or this is just a bit freaky. But the West Indies can't just look at where they have been batting. The first game, they were bowled out for 55 against a team that I don't think that many of us think are a great bowling team. So instantly, the West Indies were seen as being too attacking. It is worth pointing out that they weren't exactly scoring, at an incredible rate. And in T20 cricket, you generally go out playing attacking shots. But even so, there is no doubt that the West Indies have an all-or-nothing style to their play that bothers a lot of people. It has been there, though, for a long time. Put it this way, the West Indies have dominated franchise cricket, and specifically this tournament with 2 wins and a semi-final place in 2009. But they had the 4th best win percentage of teams with more than 10 games in the World Cup. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't. Other teams are probably more consistent. No one wins this tournament as much as the West Indies do. When it comes to T20 cricket at the World Cup, they're just better suited to other teams, and that's with the normal style that they've been using for, quite some time. And part of that is their boundaries and their dot strategy, which again has upset people at this tournament. Of course, they've been doing this forever, and they've been near top of the dot ball charts like every single tournament for 2012 and 2014 and 2016. They won 2 of them. At this stage of this tournament, their dot ball percentage is a lot worse than that. But that's also because they're battered shithouse, and they've only played 3 games, and this tournament has been full of low scores. So they haven't really changed how they're played, they've just been doing it worse. And who on earth thought the West Indies were going to turn up to this tournament and suddenly be hustling for ones? Hopefully no one. Also, I want to focus a bit on being bowled out cheaply against England. The West Indies have a lot of left-handers, and England has a good off-spinner. West Indies also have a few batters who don't love express pace, and England have one of those as well. And then there are guys who are not as good against leg spin. And what do you know? England also possesses a leggy. Not all attacks have this, but more importantly, it doesn't always fall perfectly your way when it comes to matchups. With Moeen taking 2 early wickets, the West Indies had to throw Dwayne Bravo up the order because he was right-handed. With Gale, Bravo, Pooran and Pollard kind of all grouped together, suddenly you had a bunch of guys who didn't like express pace as much. And then Russell and Pollard were in early enough that there was a leg spinner who could bowl to them. Maybe the West Indies just don't match up well against England at the moment with this lineup. But it does feel like a perfect pattern existed for England in this game, which was helped by Lendl Simmons being dismissed by Moeen Ali when he was attacking a favourable matchup. Just everything went England's way. And it was Lendl Simmons who was the anti-star, I suppose, of the second game. I think in that game, the West Indies overcorrected a bit too much from the first, and they told Simmons to block it out. They were playing a bowling-heavy South African team, and it's possible they thought they just needed enough runs. So it seemed to me, at least, that they told Simmons to just bat as far through the innings as possible, which he did well. The Problem was that he then got stuck and he just couldn't get going again. And the rest of the West Indians did not make up for what he was doing. So they ended up underscoring against South Africa, which gave the South Africans a chance to win. I honestly believe in many ways that this innings was worse than their 55 all out. I know that sounds weird, but at least in one they were trying to build a big score. In the other one, they weren't really ever trying to make that many runs. They could have battered South Africa out of the game, and they didn't. And then there is selection. Lendl Simmons came out of the third game so that Gale could move back up to opening and Roston Chase could play spin better as a right-hander, also give them some extra bowling options if they needed it. But this isn't the big story. For weeks, West Indian fans have been complaining about the selection of their squad, and it basically boils down to what arguments in the Caribbean quite often do. That there are either too many Bajans in this team, or there are not enough Bajans in this team. And so there is this constant argument since the squad was picked of why the West Indies would pick Ravi Rampal over Jason Holder. And I get it. There is no world in which Ravi Rampal is a better cricketer than Jason Holder. That's not how you pick cricket teams though, and specifically not T20 teams. Rampal's never been an incredible player, he's just a decent one. Plus he has grey hair and that makes people think he's even older than he is. And he's a good, safe pair of hands type player. But they're not like for like. But when the West Indies had an open spot because of Obed McCoy's injury, they brought Jason Holder in. Rampal is there so he and Bravo can bowl at the death. That's kind of what both of them are known for. Also, Rampal is a very good power play bowler. Holder is not like that at all. He can chip in the power play and sometimes be good. His best bowling is in the middle, and he can certainly play occasionally at the death. But again, it is not his speciality, and he's not what he's best at. It's kind of like, if you're football fans, Rampal is a defender, and Holder is like a midfielder, and maybe he can play defense on occasion. But there's no real reason to interchange them unless you have too many defenders in your team, or something has gone massively wrong. Rampal is a better bowler at the top and the bottom than Holder. And the West Indies already had 8 batting options, even in the game when they were bowled out for 55. Are we really saying that they needed 9 to win the first 2 games? I thought the team looked better with both of them in it, and Holder can bat in loads of positions. And if they have another emergency but they need a right-hander up high, certainly rather it was Holder going up the order than Bravo. But it's also weird that this is the selection thing that everyone's worried about. I mean, I think Holder's a fantastic cricketer, but there are lots of other players who do what Holder does in this team. Sunil Narine is not in this squad. I think Hussain has bowled really well. He's a very good cricketer, but he's not Sunil Narine. That is the easiest upgrade the West Indies could have made. Now, Narine, Rampal and Gale in the field would not be pretty, but it would be hard to say that Narine is worse in the field than Gale, then he's not as fit as Gale, and Gale is in this squad. During this Bangladesh game, Ian Bishop was asked about why the West Indies were doing so bad in this tournament after they had started poorly with the bat again versus Bangladesh. Obviously, they pulled that back a little bit, but he was stretching for reasons. And one thing he said was that he thought the players were really holding on for this last tournament, and obviously it's been delayed due to COVID, and it was supposed to be in Australia. And I do feel there is a little bit of a last dance vibe to all of this. Run it back with Simmons and Gale and Pollard and Russell and Bravo. But the thing is, at least 3 of them are unlikely to be in the next squad. But they are all obviously quite old. In fact, maybe even 3 or 4 of them might not be in their next World Cup squad. But I don't think Simmons was brought back for last dance vibes. It was because they wanted his stability at the top of the order. Gale is still destructive. He's a hard person to drop. Bravo just won an IPL. Pollard is looking incredible. And Russell is still capable of anything if his knees actually, support him. I just don't think they're losing because they are old. I think they're losing because this is T20, and if a bunch of your players dip in form at the same time, you can lose a couple of games on the bounce. Especially if you lose the toss 3 times in a row and the dew comes in. And this is where the luck that I was talking about before plays a huge part. This is not an ideal tournament and things are going to go wrong. But the West Indies really haven't had a game where 3 of their batters have looked in good form at the same time. I thought their bowling for most of their games, even against England, was pretty good. And I didn't think they played that much better in their win than they did in their loss against South Africa. Well, other than their fielding, which was horrendous. It's just that their batting was fixed by Pooran and Holder, and Bangladesh struggled to score quick. If Pooran gets hold of South Africa, and he looked in pretty good form in that game before he went out, and a death hitter comes off, they probably would have won that game too. We always seem to learn something about T20 from the West Indies at this tournament. And this one might be that it's all just a bit random. My honest feedback if I was working for the West Indies right now would be for their batters to find form and for them to win a toss. Put it this way. So far, Pakistan have batted second 3 times, and they are 3-0. The West Indies have batted first 3 times, and they went within a couple of misfields of being 0-3. I think Pakistan is a really good team, and I think the West Indies do have some issues. But I don't think one is a 3-0 side and the other is 0-3. T20 is random. This tournament is short. Weird shit will happen. The West Indies know how to play T20 cricket. They didn't suddenly forget just when they arrived in the UAE.